After years and years of development, Kingdom Under Fire 2 has arrived, unleashing its brand of hybrid MMORPG and real-time strategy gameplay, featuring large-scale action-packed combat which all unfolds in a visually rich fantasy world for a buy-to-play entry fee. So what is Kingdom Under Fire 2 all about, and is it worth checking out? I'm Adrian, welcome to the channel, and without further ado, let's go find out. If you're a fan of the Kingdom Under Fire franchise from Korea, you pretty much know what to expect here. For the benefit of new players, Kingdom Under Fire 2 is the long-awaited sequel. It's a buy-to-play game that costs $30 for the cheapest package, and you'll start by selecting to play as one of 5 available classes. It's a mishmash of non-selectable race and class combos, but each comes with an opening story cinematic if you want to know your character's backstory and how you end up in this fantasy world, in addition to gameplay differences, mostly in choice of weapon wielded, combat skills, and fighting styles. For example, one is better with AoE or single target over another. It's not as in-depth with its character creation either, but that's not where the strength of Kingdom Under Fire 2 is at. The game is an MMORPG that's fused with real-time strategy mechanics, similar to other games you may have heard of previously like Conqueror's Blade or Tiger Knight Online. In the tutorial, you'll learn about controlling your characters in third person, and you'll have access to hotbar skills, mouse-click skills, combos, and more, which we'll explore further in the combat section of this video. Kingdom Under Fire 2 on the surface is broken down into 2 distinct modes. The first is the third person, aka action mode. This is where you'll spend majority of your time in PvE with as you run around questing in the instance maps or in towns to craft. The other is the strategy mode, where with the hit of a key, your UI transitions smoothly into a top-down view a la Total War style to control your units and micromanage your targets and abilities. Let's break down the nitty-gritty stuff now, and that's the game's combat system utilizing those 2 modes. As an action MMO, there's no tap targets, so you'll do all your aiming manually as you execute a range of skills and spells that your chosen class possesses. In open world content, you'll find that things are more familiar. There's quests featuring kill and fetch chores, and combat here is pretty basic. Kill a bunch of mobs to complete the objectives with all the skills in your arsenal, and take advantage of this opportunity to learn all the combos that your chosen class has. In missions, things get way more interesting. You'll still use your third-person abilities on top of special finishers that can be used on downed enemies, lieutenants, and bosses. Your characters get stronger with more levels, thus unlocking more powerful combos down the line, and you'll also need to get used to commanding armies in combat. These missions are timed and almost dungeon-like because of the way they're structured, with story beats and branching objectives and the eventual boss fights. They are more difficult than open-world content, but you do have backup in the form of your army units, and if you're playing with other players, then their hero characters and army units too. All players will begin recruiting army units shortly after the tutorial, and they come in different classes as well, ranging from melee defenders to wizards and archers. Each of these units are further distinguished by faction, race, and rarity, which also means they have unique abilities and talents that gives you the freedom to build the ideal army composition in the late game through Kingdom Under Fire 2's barracks and unit leveling up system. When it comes to army unit combat, it's all about knowing how to use what you have in the given scenario. There's a bunch of hotkeys you'll need to memorize quickly, including orders to follow your character, going to offensive mode, defensive mode, and then there's the individual hotkeys to fire off their abilities as well. The AI isn't very smart, so the best thing to do is hit the tap button to transition into the real-time strategy view in missions and manually micromanage your units. At the beginning, it's okay with just one unit, but in the mid to the late game, you can bring a lot more into battle, which means the amount of work you'll need to do besides the usual third-person combat can either be a fun or tedious challenge for you. I found it to be a mixture of both, but as usual, the more you play, the better you get at executing things pretty quickly. So with these 2 combat elements mashed together, what you have is a chaotic action war game that has some serious potential to offer you hours of fun, and midway through the leveling, I think it is the game's strongest point. Where combat falls slightly short for me is in the aesthetic department mostly. Abilities and weapon impact is almost non-existent, and even with screen shake turned on, it just doesn't feel as good. Aiming is another minor disappointment for me, as sometimes skills intended for a cluster of mobs goes horribly wrong due to the game locking you into full combo animations which doesn't quite keep up with the pace of how fast these waves of enemies go down. Most missions will also have some form of boss fights, and here is where things pick up in difficulty real quick, especially for new players who are still coming to grips with the micromanaging of both the character and army units. Otherwise, the combination of MMO action combat and real-time strategy elements actually works well in this case. For progression, the basic thing to know is that the level cap is 30, and your character earns experience points from kills, quests, and missions, unlocking new gameplay features like PvP, access to guilds, factions, crafting, and more, all from following the main story campaign. It will feel like one giant tutorial at first, but it makes sense as there's so much gameplay mechanics that you'll eventually appreciate that the game is spreading them out over time. Level 30 might also sound like a short journey, but trust me, it takes a while to get there because there's a ton of content to do before you hit the cap. The most important aspects of progression in Kingdom Under Fire 2 is the gear and army units. MMO rules apply here. Better gear and gear rarity simply means better stats for your characters, so keep them updated as you level with quest drops, mission rewards, crafting, or from the auction house. There's an enchanting system here too if you're wondering. Equally crucial for your success in missions is the barracks system. In here you'll find your roster of units, their level, their abilities, and more. It's important to figure out your ideal army composition and start getting them XP early on by using them in missions. Units with enough XP, and if your barracks has enough XP, you can then promote these units, granting them better stats and abilities, which will make your life a lot easier. This is partly where the grind happens in Kingdom Under Fire 2, because from the mid-game onward, active unit slots are limited and level locked. So if you messed up leveling the wrong unit, it's time to farm the same few missions at your level again. Thankfully, there's also items and consumables to help quicken the process of leveling units, but they are somewhat rare to obtain. Therefore, joining a guild early on can be a big help, as guilds do have beneficial buffs, plus getting more players to run group missions makes the process quicker as opposed to doing it solo. Outside of the important stuff, there's mounts to obtain, titles to wear, and cosmetics to show off, all earnable in-game by simply playing, separate from what's available in the cash shop. Now, the one thing I was not expecting to find in Kingdom Under Fire 2 is a tight PvE main story campaign that's actually decent. As mentioned before, the entire game does feel like one massive tutorial, as you'll be unlocking all forms of features and new things all the way to the level cap, but the process is a rather enjoyable ride now that I look back on it, thanks to the guidance of following the game's main story PvE quests and missions. These will take you through a series of long winding objectives, and in between you'll be doing plenty of questing out on the instance maps in what I consider the classic MMORPG theme park formula, on top of the hybrid real-time strategy stuff, which are the missions, and where you can take on enemies either solo or in a group or with your guildmates. Just don't expect to be blown away. Most of these systems and mechanics are really borrowed from other games across genres, and they work well in here together for an MMO, but it really isn't groundbreaking. The game story itself can be considered as a generic MMO story, heavily influenced by plenty of fantasy staples, from Game of Thrones to Vikings to political dramas and faction warfare. The only thing that matters here is that there's a reason to progress the main missions in PvE, because the game is linear and only branches out into optional PvP content should you want to do it after the first 10 or so levels. The group missions in PvE are the best fun for me, as you truly get to experience just how large and chaotic these battles in Kingdom Under Fire 2 really are. The combination of different player classes, army units, and micromanagement styles will all factor in determining how quickly and efficiently the group can complete the mission and kill off the final boss within the time limit for some good loot, which usually are gear and equipment rewards for your character, plus bonus XP for your army and barracks depending on the mission completion score. For PvP, it's a similar formula and can be fun because the AI is no longer brain dead and you're up against real players whose strategies and unit commands will give you a real run for your money. Okay, how does the game look and how does it run? Not gonna lie here, the amount of focus the developers Blueside has dedicated into making Kingdom Under Fire 2 a visual-heavy game is somewhat impressive. From the early moments of the tutorial all the way to the level cap, through all the PvE missions and quests, you will be bombarded with cinematic transitions that seamlessly combine the game's narrative storytelling, complete with consistent voice acting to boot. The subtitle translations are not the greatest out there, but nevertheless, I appreciate the amount of work put into this department, as it makes the gameplay and leveling process a lot more interesting, knowing that there is a story to progress, and it does involve watching dialogues and cutscenes play out instead of having to just read quest text, which it does have as well, but it's a good mix overall. In large-scale combat, visually, It can either be a glorious sight or an eyesore depending on how good your gaming rig is, and only when you start paying attention to the finer details like textures of units and objects, that's when things can become dull. Performance-wise, I did experience texture pop-ins where objects and terrain suddenly appear on screen, and no amount of setting tweaks can fix stuff like that, but otherwise, no other complaints from me. The game looks good where it matters, if that's important to you. Okay, let's talk about microtransactions. The game does indeed have an in-game cash store with two currencies to use. One is a cash to gem convert, while the other can be earned in-game by playing through the content to buy most of the same things the premium gems can buy. You'll find cosmetic outfits aplenty alongside several minor buffs and boosts for your characters, including a 30-day subscription-like package that offers bonuses to troop training, gold, and the ability to expand bag slots among other things. Again, players won't need to spend real money on these, as the non-premium currency, which are also known as cubes I think, can be earned in-game by simply playing the game. What you won't find is blatant pay-to-win stuff like gear or high-end troops, and no loot boxes too, which is somewhat commendable. So in conclusion, is Kingdom Under Fire 2 worth the buy-to-play price to check out? If you're feeling adventurous and want to try something different within the MMO genre, then I'd say yeah, it's worth looking into. MMORPGs and real-time strategy hybrids are uncommon for sure, but there's a reason for that. It's a niche. Not many games can pull off a formula that actually offers substantial progression, a decent enough PvE storyline, a combat system that works, PvP, and hold back on pushing cash-up advantages down your throat. Kingdom Under Fire 2 delivers on most of that, which kind of explains its buy-to-play price of $30 US. In fact, for what it offers and where the quality of the game overall is at, I personally prefer it to its competitor, Conqueror's Blade, which is free to play. For concerns, right now from what I've observed, the player base is kinda low from my experience of waiting in mission party queues forever on Primetime EU, which is worrying in the long run, and should the game eventually go free to play, then perhaps we might see more cash up shenanigans. But to be clear, I somewhat enjoyed Kingdom Under Fire 2 more than I thought I would, and with it being buy to play, I can see myself returning once in a while if I ever need a Dynasty Warriors fix with an MMO feel, and other players to carry me when I've forgotten my unit ability hotkeys and my character's combos. Anyway, that about wraps up my quick thoughts on the game after spending a short time with it. For those who have played it already or are playing it right now, share your experience with the game down in the comment section below. Would you recommend it to your fellow players who are curious about this MMO real-time strategy hybrid? Let us know. Hit the like button if you like the content, and feel free to subscribe to the channel and get notified on all new videos by clicking that bell icon. Once again, I'm Adrian, and I thank you for watching.